Alrighty, so welcome back. Um, I am tired of explaining stuff like this when it comes to things like critical race theory, and so I kind of just made a basic little document here just to summarize the reasoning. Okay, so generally when I talk about something like critical race theory or whether or not something is racist, it usually, and when I mean racist, I largely mean systemically, but I get into this rabbit hole of crap, and I'm just not portraying it well or something to people when I'm talking about it. Like, it just goes over their head, and a lot of it is because this is very unintuitive, very unintuitive, and so I probably need to be a little bit more patient in breaking it down for people, which is fine. I can do that. But it's very much important to understand what the claim someone is making when they're talking about critical race theory. So I kind of just wanted this to be more of a breakdown of underlying philosophy and presumptions that are incorporated so that when people hear this, they will react better than using the same arguments over and over again, which I'm starting to think it makes me irritated because I'm convinced that they just haven't taken the time to try to understand the point of view, and they find it unintuitive, so they just throw their intuition at it effectively. And this is probably largely true because most people don't like to look into things. I mean, heck, I didn't really learn about this in college either, so I was really opposed to it for the longest time. I mean, as I looked at it again, I tried to look at it more critically and tried to really consider what was being stated as opposed to just jumping to conclusions, because a lot of this stuff is very complicated. But yeah, no, we're gonna go through this article and just hop right into it. So I got in an argument fairly recently, and I hear this from conservatives all the time, but basically with this situation, I had expressed that, there's all these instances of black people not doing as well in schools, black people getting suspended more, black people being disproportionately put in prison, or convicted of crimes that are harsher than white people who undergo the same or similar punishments. And the argument I always get is that a theory can be disproven by a specific counterexample, by one counterexample. And I mean, if it's a counterexample, then yes. If it's an actual counterexample, then yes. But the counterexample that is always pushed to me in some way, shape, form, or another is something like, yeah, if somebody doesn't study well enough, they're not going to do as well in school. This is a counter to CRT. And I'm like, bro, let's take that one step further. What is causing this particular group of people to not study as well? What is causing, and you can substitute this with virtually anything, what is causing this group of people, let's say black people, to get put in prison more? What is causing this group of people to grow or to have kids out of wedlock? What is causing these kids to get suspended more? And if you just say, oh, well, they are rowdy, or they can't behave themselves in school. Okay, well, why can't they behave themselves? That should always be the question. Why? Why can't they behave themselves in school? Now, if we go back further, that could be a ton of reasons, a ton of sociological reasons that could result in someone not studying well, or getting thrown in prison, or whatever situation you want to incur. So, let's take the school one, right? So black kids get suspended more than white kids, right? So why would these black kids get more suspended? Well, there's a ton of reasons. Maybe it's that their family, or they don't have a good family structure. Maybe they haven't been taught. Maybe they're just kind of living day to day. Maybe their parents are druggies. Maybe they're homeless. Maybe, maybe it could be a ton of different things. Maybe they're getting bullied and they don't have anybody to help stand up for them. Maybe they are getting sexually abused. Maybe they are on drugs. I mean, there's a ton of reasons why they could be studying. And if you think that this is a single counterexample because they don't study as well, and you're saying that it's not a sociological determinant, or influence, I should say, not determinant necessarily, but an influence, like poor parental structure or poor culture, poor neighborhood, and you're saying that it is solely the performance of this person based on who they are. Okay, well, what does it mean for who you are? Or what does it mean that you can't perform based on who you are? What is that saying? That is fundamentally saying that this person has a problem with basic human tasks that other races, like whites, seem to statistically have a better time with. Now, that's fine if you're saying it. That might be okay, or at least you might perceive it to be okay in regard to an individual. But then you have to say that every individual, or most individual, or more individuals in this particular group, let's say black people, are naturally worse at studying, are naturally worse at being good human beings, hence why they have a higher crime rate, and are naturally just worse at running businesses, naturally worse at financial literacy, naturally worse at, and when you say naturally worse, you are saying that that person is naturally, or this group of people has a natural tendency to be inferior in these capacities based on what we're seeing. That is fucking racism, is what that is. So, anyway, sorry about the rant. I figured I would just break the underlying philosophy down so that people would just have like a better understanding of what we're saying. Because I mean, I'm a little fed up because I've had to explain this way too many times to people, and even then they still resort to similar arguments without really addressing what I say, which is, it's okay. It's hard to grasp in like a one-time conversation, I guess. But anyway, let's hop into this. So I think it's always important to have a definition of racist, and I have a really quick, simple syllogism right here that is going to take 5 seconds to outline. So, premise 1. Racism is defined that a belief that race is fundamental is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. In the example I just defined, for like when black kids do worse in schools, when black people get thrown in jail more, racial, like that might not be conscious in you, but when you just decide to like operate and move forward, this is what you're saying. This is what you're saying when you're using that reason. You're saying that this particular race has a higher proclivity, or so you're saying that white people have a higher proclivity than black people in regard to this particular area of societal success. So you are saying, by deductive reasoning, that white people produce an inherent superiority because they're white. You may not actively say because they're white, but you're saying this group of people is just naturally superior. And when it's this bad, and to say that no sociological deterrents are affecting black people, that is just freaking ignorant. It's so ignorant. I like to say that people are not influenced by their environment is wild. So anyway, I'm getting away from the logic here and more to the emotion, so we'll go back to logic. So racism is defined as a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. A person who holds this belief and acts on it through discriminatory behavior or attitudes is considered to be racist. Conclusion. Therefore, what makes someone racist is their belief in the inherent superiority of one race over another. Their actions that reflect and foster this belief. I'm going to read that again. Therefore, what makes someone racist is their belief in the inherent superiority of one race over another, and their actions that reflect and foster this belief. So when we're talking about actions, let's go here. I have a black kid, right, sitting here. Nobody talks to him. And then we have a white kid. Mom, daughter, girl, guy, mom, guy, making sure she's okay. nobody does that to the black kid. That's a perfect example of systemic racism. Do you think, like, most of these people do not think they're racist? Likely. I mean, maybe there's some who acknowledge it, but there's just a black girl sitting here. They ignore her, and a white person, and when a white kid's there, they look at them completely different. So that's just an example. Anyway, so this is the syllogism. But I think if you're still not getting this, then we need to talk about a couple of things. So I'm going to delve a little bit into like basic philosophy. We're going to get away from racism and just talk about things like utilitarianism and social constructionism, because this is what people hate, or this is what people have a really hard time with getting. And honestly, I had a hard time with it too, so I can't be too mad. And I also had a pretty privileged childhood, so I can't really complain. But anyway, so social constructionism. So social constructionism is the view that many things that we take for granted in everyday life are actually fundamentally and correctly social constructs. So let's take a ball rolling down a hill, for example. This is a completely mundane statement that has no charge to it. So this ball, and this is very simple. If you want to get more complicated, like look up some resources or something like that, I can also recommend some stuff if you want me to. Just comment below. But let's say a ball is rolling down a hill. So when we see a ball rolling down the hill, and someone asks, "Oh, what's that over there?" We're like, "Oh, it's just a ball rolling down the hill." We don't think twice about it. We just move on with our day. We intuitively know what a ball is. We intuitively know what rolling down the hill is. But when it comes to defining these things, we need to address what we mean and what actually happens when we talk about everyday things. So let's take the word ball, for example, right? Everybody knows what a ball is. I mean, I can look up a picture of a soccer ball, and maybe it's made of leather, or maybe it's got some other material to wrap a substance and it's filled with air. There's a ton of different ways we can make a ball, but it's a spherical object that has an intent of rolling, effectively. So with that said, we have the word ball, right? Now, when we're saying the word ball, it's going to have different components to it. So we have the word, and this is great art, by the way, but we have the word ball, which is the verbal portrayal of sound to identify with a perceived object, in this case, a ball. So the word ball is used to reference the perceived object that we see. Not necessarily what it is, but what we see, which is a ball. Second, we have the image of the ball. So this is what we perceive as the ball. So maybe you have a soccer ball, right? And you look at the soccer ball, and it's black and white, and that's what you were seeing. So that's the image that you associate with the word to conclude that object, which is the soccer ball, is a ball. Next, you have the word real. So now there's more official terms. You can learn this in like any first year college speech class, honestly, and you might even learn it in high school, depending on where you're at. But you have what the ball actually is. So this is its molecular structure, its its isotopic nature, or whatever the actual construction of the ball is. But technically, it doesn't likely look. It isn't what we just see it as. It isn't exactly what the image is. It's got a real composition to it that, when put together in a macroscopic object, we can feel, touch, play with, do all sorts of things with. So I hope that makes sense. So when you are saying things like ball or spoon or table or racism, you are charging it with a bunch of normative baggage that you're not necessarily recognizing. So let's go back to the word racism now. So how can racism be a social construct when it's literally about race? So as we just talked about, you have the word racism, which is used to associate with a particular action. The belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities. So when you stop at race to conclude that somebody is performing, or when you stop at their biology and you say, okay, this is what makes this person not good. That's when you're racist, because you're saying that biology belongs to a black person, and that black person and a ton of these other black people, more so than these white people over here, are performing inherently insuperior. So, so racism is a fairly new word, but basically it's like if so it's basically like if you're racist, or if you think that black people are inherently insuperior, then you have the word to describe that, right? So you have the word racism. You also have the image of that, which is the idea that black people are performing worse in these ideas. And what's really happening is that the human brain is using reason to justify an innate bias that is present in itself. So yes, that's the composition of the word racist. Like if we switched out ball with racist. Now, if you have a problem with that, please let me know. I'd be interested in some sort of like logical attack on this, but this is what a lot of people don't realize when they say words like racism. I think a really helpful quote, and this is a great article, by the way. I had it linked up here just because here's some definitions. But I'll talk about different types of racism. But there's a quote at the bottom I really wanted you to see, and it is. So, where are you here? Where are you? Maybe it was up further. Yeah, okay. So, no one is born racist or anti-racist. And obviously anti-racist is to be against this stuff, so it's not just moving on with your daily life and ignoring it. I'll shut up and read this quote. To be anti-racist is a radical choice in the face of history, requiring a radical reorientation of our consciousness. In other words, it is very easy to be racist. Very easy. And I don't want to say you're a terrible person, but I think that if you want to help marginalized people, you should consider things like this. So let me read this too. Being anti-racist results from a conscious decision to make frequent, consistent, equitable choices daily. These choices require ongoing self-awareness and self-reflection as we move through life. In the absence of making anti-racist choices, we unconsciously uphold aspects of white supremacy. Unconsciously. And this video is an example of that. Totally unconscious. Totally. So, unconsciously uphold aspects of white supremacy, white dominant culture, and unequal institutions and society. Being racist or anti-racist is not about who you are, it is about what you do. And that perfectly summarizes, at least at a base level, what CRT is about, what critical race theory is about, and why, when you are arguing against things like this, you are simply missing the mark on what is being stated. Now, that is okay. I think we've all done it to some capacity, including myself. But when this is something that you are radically defending, like this is why technically you are being racist. And there has to be some really strange semantic game to kind of weave out of that. And a lot of times it isn't being met. So next time you're talking with a leftist or someone who you disagree with in regard to this, hopefully you'll be a little bit more informed. But yeah, if you have any questions or concerns or ideas or things I could have done better, just let me know, leave a comment, and I'll get to it. Alrighty, thank you. Bye.